Hello students! When taking a reading comprehension test, have you ever been stumped by a question asking about how the author or another character feels about a specific character? Or perhaps when reading a novel or a story, you're somewhat confused trying to figure out the character's personality or motivation. If this happens to you, then you may not realize that the author is expecting you, the reader, to use your inferencing skills and use the clues that he or she has given you about these characters. And today we're going to explore the way authors describe characters, called direct and indirect characterization. We are also going to look at the way an author's use of characterization may interfere with your reading comprehension. And you'll have a chance to practice answering test-like questions about characterization. The lesson starts now. Suppose you have a writing assignment and you want to describe your characters. You could do it in one of two ways. You could tell the reader about your character using adjectives, or you could show the reader your character's speech or dialogue. You can show actions using verbs, his thoughts, the impact on others, and even their names. This way the reader can form an inference and form a conclusion in his own mind. Let's make up a character. A little boy named Hector. Hector was playing with his friend, but Hector lost the game. How did Hector feel about losing the game?
Ah, fiddle faddle!
I could say, Hector was furious. Or I could say, Hector stormed into the house and slammed the door. He stomped his feet as he walked to his room and pushed his little brother out of the way. Now, which of these would you say sounds more interesting? If you say the second one, you are correct. Which one is easier to understand? If you said the first one, then you are also correct. In the first example, I used direct characterization. I told you what Hector is like. Notice that you did not have to do that much thinking. You didn't have to make an inference or draw a conclusion because I explicitly described the character Hector by using an adjective. In this case, furious. In the second example, I used indirect characterization. I implicitly described the character by, in this case, showing his actions, using verbs like stormed, slammed, stomped, pushed. And since I used indirect characterization, you, the reader, had to make an inference. You had to draw a conclusion by putting all the pieces of information together. So what can we infer about Hector? Sore loser, bully, hothead, mean. You can probably think of some other words to describe Hector. Even the name I chose for this fictional character is intentional, because to hector someone means to bully or to intimidate them. So our character's name fits him to a T. Characterization is a description of a character's physical traits, a character's personality, a character's thoughts, and a character's actions. Let's look at some examples of direct and indirect characterization in literature. Today we're going to look at Roald Dahl's Matilda. Matilda is a story about a child, obviously named Matilda, who is gifted and precocious, but she has the misfortune of having the most uncaring, horrible parents. She also encounters a tyrannical headmistress when she attends school, but also warm and kind adults such as the librarian, Mrs. Phelps, and her teacher, Miss Honey. And although Matilda is a children's book, Dahl's writing is amazing, and I encourage you to pick up this delightful book full of dark humor with elements of sadness, despair, hope, and empowerment. It's a must-read. So today we'll look at how the author, Roald Dahl, uses direct and indirect characterization to make his characters come alive. We'll look at examples of speech and dialogue, of actions, thoughts, appearance, impact on others, and even the names that Roald Dahl gives his characters. Let's start with speech and dialogue. "Don't you ever stop reading?" he snapped at her. "Oh, hello, Daddy," she said pleasantly. "Did you have a good day?" "What is this trash?" he said, snatching the book from her hands. Now think about this. What do you think about this character and the way he talks to his daughter? And his actions. With frightening suddenness, he now began ripping the pages out of the book in handfuls and throwing them in the waste paper basket. Mrs. Phelps looked along the shelves, taking her time. How, she asked herself, does one choose a famous grown-up book for a 4-year-old child? Mrs. Wormwood was a large woman whose hair was dyed platinum blonde, except where you could see the mousy brown bits growing out from under the roots. She wore heavy makeup, and she had one of the unfortunate bulging figures where the flesh appears to be strapped in all around the body to prevent it from falling out. Over the next few afternoons, Mrs. Phelps could hardly take her eyes from the small girl sitting for hour after hour in the big armchair at the far end of the room with the book on her lap. And let's look at the names. The titular character is Matilda, and Matilda means might and strength, and that describes our heroine. Miss Honey, Mr. and Mrs. Wormwood. You see, Dahl deliberately names his characters to describe their qualities. The name Jennifer means the fair one or blessed spirit, and Honey, well, we all know that honey is sweet. Characterization is an important technique that authors use to make a story compelling because in order to interest and move readers, characters need to seem real, and authors achieve this by providing details that make characters individual and particular. Good characterization gives readers a strong sense of the characters' personalities and complexities. It makes the characters vivid, alive, and believable. Let's go on and do some reading comprehension practice. When taking a reading or language test, many questions will be centered around the characters. These are not only questions that ask specifically about characterization, but also about tone, mood, author's purpose, compare-contrast, sequence, and main idea. So let's look at some examples from standardized tests. We'll start with elementary level questions and go all the way up to college level passages. How did you do? I hope that you noticed that understanding character development plays a crucial role in not only your writing and comprehension, but also your ability to apply this knowledge when taking reading tests. As I mentioned earlier, knowing about characterization will help you develop your characters when you write a story, but more importantly, it will also help you understand the characters when you are reading complex text, because you will be drawing conclusions based on how the writer describes the characters. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you'll be notified every time I upload a new video.